Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large. And this week you can see, if you are following on YouTube, that I have a special guest, Jim Helton, who is the national field organizer for the American Atheists. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, you can't see him, of course, but go ahead and say hi, Jim.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being on. I really appreciate your time. There has been, this is actually this National Field Organizer title is a relatively new one for you?
Yes, just a couple weeks old, actually.
Wow. How did that happen, and what does that entail exactly?
I had this idea of a grassroots movement, basing it off the model of what the tri-state free thinkers have done locally, fighting for equal rights in the separation church and state. And when I looked across the country, there was no organization or no person helping affiliates and local groups do activism. So I pitched to American Atheists that this is what needs to be done. We need a grassroots movement focusing on equal rights, the separation of church and state, working with Planned Parenthood, protecting LGBT rights, all these things. And we need to help organize our state directors and help organize the affiliates to do this grassroots movement. Because if you look at the federal government of what's going on now, even depending on what state you live in, a lot of people feel helpless. But at the local grassroots level of school boards and city councils, we can have a big impact. We are actually getting legislation passed and doing a lot of good work. So we wanted to put that across the country, and that's kind of my job. And my goal is to work with local free thought and atheist groups to do just that.
Well, that is really good news, actually. So it sort of makes you a bit of a liaison between not just a liaison, but kind of a helpful big brother, maybe, in terms of coordinating with local groups.
Yeah, we're not here to tell people what to do, but we're here to help them offer advice. If they want to take on an issue, we can help them with the legislation or give them tips for whatever issue they want to take on. We'll pretty much offer a cafeteria plan of issues, and whatever that group wants to do will help. We also realize there's some amazing groups doing amazing things out there, and we just want to give them tools to make successful. On the other end, there may be groups that need just basic help organizing. Like, hey, well, how do you do membership dues? Hey, I want to become a nonprofit. What does that entail? They might have some basic questions. And starting a group from scratch myself, I know how to do that. And so we can provide those resources no matter where the group is, whether it's being started from day one or they've been around 20 years, we can offer support to whatever that group wants.
You know, that is extremely helpful and very good news. I have recently been elected to the board of directors of the Secular Hub here in Denver. And knowing what now, I'm really glad, and actually wasn't even particularly looking for this and going into the podcast, but I think that what you're offering is going to be very helpful locally here, because our group, the Secular Hub, has been around for about 4 or 5 years, and it's not established and operational, but in terms of activism and working with the local chapter of American Atheists and getting, in terms of legislative help or help with how to do certain activities, I think this will be, I'm quite excited to hear what you just said. I think this is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, I would love to work with you on that.
Awesome. Can you give maybe a couple examples of maybe some, what's happening either there locally or around the country with some of this work that people might be interested in hearing about?
Sure. So a lot of schools around the country are teaching abstinence-only sex education where a church comes in and teaches it. Most people aren't aware of this. This is going all across the country. So we went into schools and said, hey, this is what's going on. The principals had no idea what was being taught, showed them the scientific evidence of how this was harmful, and then kind of gave them and we've gotten it thrown out of schools. We've actually been successful getting the churches thrown out of schools and providing comprehensive sex education. We've also looked at cities and helped the city of Cincinnati become a sanctuary city to protect immigrants. We were involved in Cities for CEDAW, which is the conference to end discrimination against women, which we got passed in the city of Cincinnati as well. And we've also taken on a number of issues of passing fairness ordinances in Kentucky, looking at local cities, small cities, to pass that to protect LGBT rights so they can't be fired, so they can't be refused service. They can't be refused housing. So these are the types of things we're doing, kind of boots on the ground here locally. And we see other people even taking on bigger issues across the country at the state level, like in the federal level of the Johnson Amendment is a big one, and other separation church-state issues.
Oh, if you could explain quickly because I don't think a lot of people are going to fully grok this thing. What is the Johnson Amendment, and what does that have to do with separation of church and state?
So this is the thing most people know about the Johnson Amendment, is that 501c3s, which include a religion, nonprofits, can endorse candidates. They can't come out and say, I'm for or against this candidate. Churches seem to be doing that anyway, but they've never been prosecuted for it.
Yeah.
But that's not the scary part about the Johnson Amendment. If the Johnson Amendment is repealed, basically what happens is, as a nonprofit, if you give money to American Atheists reports it. They can't keep you anonymous if it's a large donor. You can see where the money is, and you can see where the money goes. Everything is transparent. Now, if the Johnson Amendment's gone, you could give $10 million to a church. We wouldn't know where it came from, and we wouldn't know where it's going. That church could then becomes a super PAC.
Right.
So we would have no idea. Super PACs would become irrelevant. The churches would become the super PAC, where millions of dollars would funnel into churches tax-free, as a tax deduction for people, and they would funnel it out to candidates. That's what nobody's talking about, and that's the scariest part if the Johnson Amendment's gone. It's not just verbally saying, I'm for this candidate. It's the amount of money that would flow through churches.
Oh, man. I can just see right away the abuse that would just run rampant with something like that.
Absolutely. And American Atheists isn't the only one, against this. A lot of organizations are, including religious organizations. They realize that this will ruin their religion itself by just treating it as a super PAC and money being manipulated by politics and big money. So there are a number of religious organizations saying we absolutely do not want this.
Well, good for them. I'm glad to hear that, because all too often we see people who are only thinking in the short term, or only thinking in the immediacy of what this is going to give them, or what they'll gain from doing this. But I think it's wise leadership that sees that could actually tear the entire structure down by corrupting it.
Absolutely.
That's good. That's good to hear. Okay. Also, just one other thing I wanted to touch on real fast, because I think, some people possibly might not really get what the big problem is with abstinence-only education. You mentioned the scientific evidence that shows that this is harmful. Just for my listeners, I don't have a question about it, but why is, abstinence-only education not the way to go when it comes to teaching sex ed?
One, it only has a 2% success rate. So only 2% wait till marriage to have sex. Mm-hmm. The other thing, they give quotes like this. Lauren had sex before marriage. Now, when she presents herself to her husband, she'll be presenting him pre-chew chewing gum. What does Lauren mean by pre-chew chewing gum? And this is what's. They also talk about condoms are not safe. They do not protect you from a broken heart. And they also talk about they don't protect you from diseases.
Well, that's just not true.
Right. And there's a bunch of information just like that, where they're flat out lying. Like, out of the 80-page book that my children brought home, I highlighted 20 pages that were flat out lies and another 20 that were problematic or deceptive. So that was half the book.
Wow.
There's only 13 states in the entire country that require comprehensive sex education that's scientifically and medically accurate. Only 13.
Wow.
So this is going on across the country, and it's funded over the last dozen years or so. Over $1 billion of federal money has gone to fund this program, which is an evangelical church-based program.
What? Is that for real?
Yes.
Okay. How do churches get federal or state money to fund public education programs? Isn't that the most obvious violation of church and state? How does that even work?
So, like, here in Kentucky, the churches formed what they call a New Hope Center, which is a different organization ran by the churches.
Okay.
And they come in and teach this program, abstinence only till marriage. When one of the parents asked the presenter what their number one goal was, they said to spread the word of Jesus. So and then when they look for volunteers, they put it on a Christian volunteer website. We need volunteers, no experience necessary. People have no idea the people that are coming in and teaching this that have no clue about actual sex. It doesn't even mention,
or education for that matter.
Yes. It doesn't mention LGBT. It acts like gay people don't even exist. Everything's between a man and a woman. It's also sexist. It talks about porn addiction, which isn't a thing. That's not even true. It talks about if a woman is raped, it was kind of her fault. Like, she shouldn't have been drinking. She shouldn't have been wearing slutty clothes. It's victim blaming. Like, there's so many levels of problems with what's being taught. It's ridiculous.
Wow. It's reminiscent of Bill Gothard's nonsense. I just last week had posted a hour-long, sort of expose of Gothard's teachings and victim shaming and that sort of thing is very much a part of that. And that's all Christian cult. That's a Christian-based thing.
And when we start looking at all these issues, we found a couple things in common, all of them across the board. One, they boiled down to equal rights. I mean, really, all of these issues are equal rights. Mm-hmm. Two, they're all really the separation of church and state, because the religious rights behind all of them. So as an activist, a lot of people in the secular movement, atheist movement, only are finding like, oh, I want to stop the Gideons from coming. But they don't think as Planned Parenthood is a separation church-state issue. They don't think as sex education is a separation church-state issue. They don't think of LGBT discrimination as a separation church-state issue. But if you take religion out of all of those arguments in that conversation, we're all of a sudden not having any of those arguments. We're not having, all those go away on the most part. So we wanted to bring people's attention that these are equal rights issues. The other thing that we found here locally is when we stood up for equal rights, for all these issues, we were there marching, protesting, demonstrating, talking to city councils, talking to school boards. We changed the way people thought of the word atheist. You talk about coming out of the closet. David Silverman says, if you come out of the closet and tell your neighbor you're an atheist, you can change that person's mind that you're a normal, good person. But if you come out for a community for equal rights, you can change the entire community's view of what they think of an atheist or somebody that not religious is. It has a major impact. We have city council members asking to speak at our meetings, the mayor inviting me to things. They're not afraid to be associated with us now because they understand we're doing good work, standing up for equal rights. And they're not afraid to be associated with atheists. And we couldn't say that a year or two ago. That will have a major impact.
No, that is awesome. And that's exactly the kind of thing that communities need all over the U.S. So your earlier offer of assistance with organizing, I mean, there's some meat behind that talk. It's not just, air. And that is very good.
When I was doing a speech for Sanctuary City, after I was done speaking, I got a high five by a priest and an imam. I never thought I would see that day where priests and Muslim imams are giving me high fives and saying, great job. I had to do a double take. I had a picture. We got a great picture of David Silverman, American Atheist, hugging a nun when we were there at a Trump demonstration, for infrastructure and the Johnson Amendment. They came together because they agreed on issues. Now, do those two agree on a lot of issues? Absolutely not. But we agreed on this issue, and we were there side by side, and that's much more powerful when you have oppositions come together for an issue. People tend to listen more.
Exactly. And when I had David Silverman on this podcast, and I talked to him, I believe it came up that we spoke briefly about working with religious groups on common ground issues, and he sort of didn't really sound like he was so into that. It wasn't really a thing that that atheist organizers and group leaders have particularly thought of. And I've always thought it's a huge omission to not think in those terms, because there are common ground issues that there's a lot of power behind religious groups.
It's a fine line between giving them credibility and, because a lot of times they're the ones discriminating, like especially in the LGBT community. So It's a balancing act, and we struggle with it. So it's not easy. But when we do actions, like when we did the Ark Encounter protest the first time, we put up a huge sign and billboard on that opening day that at Genocide and Incest Park. Like, we pulled no punches.
Right.
But the very next weekend, I was at a church feeding the homeless with the church.
Right.
So, we don't hold back on the activism we do for atheists calling out churches. Or when I go to an LGBT event, can I just be honest? The elephant in the room is religion. This is why you're being discriminated against. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can have a conversation how to go about it. And I appreciate the religious leaders that are here, but you also have to understand this is part of the problem. And I was the only one to say it where nobody else would at every meeting I've been to. And the priest even came up to me and said, "You're absolutely right."
Mm-hmm. That's right. And it's interesting how it's these kind of actions, it's at the local level, at the state level, that make the change at the national level. Because at this point, I think, well, you tell me, would you say that now, as opposed to 10, 20 years ago, even Republican senators and representatives are like, "Oh yeah, no, I was always for LGBT rights." Like, it's kind of it's become a much more accepted thing to be more for those equal rights than it used to be.
And a lot of that is because they realize their family members or coworkers or friends, people are coming out of the closet.
Yep.
So they're realizing, oh, well, Susie isn't bad. And it changes my, unfortunately, that's what it takes. They should realize that based on other people. But once it hits home, they come around.
Yep.
And it's changed things. I've even had Republicans offer to take me to lunch because they're running for a campaign. I have to tell them we can't endorse candidates, but I can talk to them about the issues that are important to me and why.
Yep.
And they realize the influence we're having in the area when people are thinking about running for office. And I can talk to them before then, but once they run, but it shows the influence we have and people are paying attention.
Yes, exactly. And that's why we need more of us atheists coming out, loud and proud, and and following in the footsteps of the civil rights movements that have come before us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's definitely good stuff. Now, closer to home, you're in Kentucky, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
I live in between the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter.
Right. And you guys, I was so bummed in retrospect to have not taken the time to go over to that Creation Museum when I came out and spoke with you guys at your group. I'm kicking myself almost every day thinking about the lost potential of having seen that with my own two eyes. But being that close.
We'll have to have you back maybe on the next Ark protest, and we can get you into the Ark and the Creation Museum.
That would be awesome. I'd love to get out there. So let's talk about the Ark now, because this Ark Encounter, first off, why don't we just tell everybody what is the Ark Encounter? What is the whole deal? Because not everybody's going to know. And what's your problem with it?
So I have so many problems with it, but the Ark Encounter just came in at under $100 million to build a replica of Noah's Ark.
Okay.
They did this while receiving up to $18 million in tax money. They're discriminating against the LGBT community. Catholics and Jews can't even get hired there, so not even all Christians can. The county gave them over 100 acres for $1. They gave them over $100,000 in cash. They did a junk bond of 60-something million dollars, and then 75% of the real estate taxes go back towards paying back the junk bond, not to the county.
Wow.
In addition, they redistrict to a TIF district, which says employees in that area and surrounding areas have to pay 2% of their paychecks to pay back the Ark Encounter's junk bond loan.
Really?
Yes. So employees are paying part of that back. This is why when we talk about attendance being down under what's predicted, based on the finance deal of the $65 million in junk bonds, which the real estate taxes is paying, the employees' 2% tax, and the donations they received out of this $100 million project, the Ark Encounter doesn't have that much money in the end. That was their money. So financially, despite what people are reporting, they're doing fine. They're doing well. And in the fiscal year from the time it opened, we project just under 1 million people will have gone seen it. Now, that's a third of what Ken Ham was bragging about, but still almost 1 million people at $40 a pop. The way you finance this they're doing well. They're not going to be bankrupt by tomorrow or next year like some of the people are thinking.
You're right. There might be some overly enthusiastic reporting about the imminent downfall of the of Noah's Ark.
Yeah. And Ken Ham's blaming the atheists for, down attendance or reporting, which I just respond, you're welcome.
Right.
We do our part, but when this started, most of the pieces were fluff pieces, like, oh, they're building this great project around Noah's Ark. And so a lot of people before us wrote articles about it. Individuals were writing things, some group organizers, but but still overall, the main story was this is a good thing. So we locally decided to put up a billboard that said Genocide and Incest Park.
Wow.
And that got everybody's attention. Even before it went up, like, we just said, we have this thought, we put it out there, and if you gave us $500, you could actually be drowning in the ocean trying to get onto the Ark. So it got so much attention to where we were, the Washington Post, Miami Herald, New York Times. And then from there, we decided to do a protest of it to talk about the issues. I mean, you built this $100 million park on a story that's based on genocide and incest. Like, you can do it, but is that really a family fun day? Has anybody actually read this story?
Right.
Realize what a horrible idea this is. And they really created a thing to where the entrance gate is a for-profit company, which can receive state tax money. So if you're a for-profit company, you can receive state tax dollars, but you can't discriminate in your hiring practices.
Right.
If you're a nonprofit, you can discriminate on your hiring practices. It's legal, but you can't receive state money. So the entrance gate's a for-profit company that receives state tax money, and the boat itself is a nonprofit that can discriminate, that hires all the employees.
Okay, nice loopholes and shenanigans going on there, because they do discriminate in their hiring practices. Is that right?
Yeah, and if you're single, they make you sign a vow of chastity saying you can't have sex till you're married.
What?
Yes, I can't make this stuff up.
Are you kidding me with that?
When I was doing an interview from the UK, from England, I gave all these facts out, and she said I was the funniest guy she ever talked to, but she couldn't use any of my stuff if I wasn't going to be serious. And I told her to fact check me, and she called me the next day apologizing, said everything you said was 100% true. I cannot believe it.
Wow.
Like, she just thought I was doing exaggerated claims. I'm like, I can't make this up.
That is Scientology level insanity. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just, you have to literally sign a vow of chastity to work there if you're single?
Yes.
What?
And if you want to work there, you have to have a letter from your pastor, and it has to be the right pastor. Meaning, if you go to a church that doesn't teach creationism, then they won't hire you. You can't even get hired. So you have to have a letter from the right kind of pastor.
Wow.
To work there. So most of the residents of Grant County don't even qualify to work there.
Wow. Okay. Well, so that's so much for creating jobs and assisting with infrastructure, local economy and infrastructure. Okay. So now I just got to ask. I mean, you've been out there, with the original protest when it opened. Aaron Ra was out there. Ken Ham comes out, and Ken Ham is the guy who organized this whole thing and leads the organization that runs this thing. Is that right?
Yeah, he leads Answers in Genesis, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Answers in Genesis. That's what it's called. Now, one maybe plus about him is he doesn't hide. He's not like David Miscavige of Scientology who, hides behind his barbed wire fences. Ken Ham comes out and at least he'll engage. Have you ever engaged with him?
Yes. My engagement with him started a couple times where we adopted the highway in front of the Creation Museum. Mm-hmm. And he did not like that at all. We adopted the highway in front of the Ark. But when he saw the Genocide and Incest Park billboard and he saw that we were actually protesting, my Twitter feed blew up about 6:30, 7:30 in the morning of him just coming at me all morning for about an hour. I was like, wow. And next, an hour later, I had press at my door for like 4 hours.
Nice.
So he understands media. Once he realized the attention we were getting, he decided to jump on the bandwagon and we'll pile on to create controversy to get his people fired up.
Right.
So that's why he talks about atheists so much. If he doesn't feel like you're going to get him any attention, then he won't call you out. That's why he goes after Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist. He goes after Bill Nye, the science guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we were getting all this attention with our protest, he came after us as well.
Okay.
But
I'm just curious, what is their position? I mean, do they engage at all on that protest point, the perfectly valid protest point of genocide and incest?
So it's really bizarre. They had employees at the protest site. So people that worked at the Creation Museum were at the protest site, and I was told Ken Ham's daughter was there as well by one of the officers, but I couldn't confirm that. So when we talked to them about the story, you know, they justify it even in the museum itself that incest is okay, like because it was God's word, and they give this justification of why it was okay and why people were wicked and deserved to die and to start over. And I'm like, but and people have accused me and said, Jim, that's harsh. You know, you shouldn't use words like genocide. And I said, okay, give me a better word that describes what happened. Give me one word, just one, that describes what happened, and I'll use it. And to date, no one's given me a better word.
Right. Well, that's because there isn't one. It is the right word.
Yeah. And they were saying, well, what if my kids drive by and see that? I'm like, you're willing to take them to the park to a whole museum based on this story. All I'm doing is advertising for them. It's not my book. You know, don't yell at me. Yell at them. All I'm doing is advertising for them.
Wow. I'm just curious how they, you know, internally would brush that off, or, you know, oh, that's not true or something. I was just wondering what the reaction was.
Well, the one reaction was that I remember the most was they said, I can see how you would think that.
Okay.
Because when I actually got to tour the Ark with Bill Nye's film crew, invited me to tour the Ark, so I got to do that with Bill Nye, and then Aaron Ra, and for a bit we got separated, and Aaron Ra was debating all the scientific facts with the employees, and I was coming at it from a morality point of view because Aaron knew science way better than I did, so I was going it from a morality point of view, and you know, you could see them thinking, like, I could see why you would think that. But, you know, it was all about once God says it's okay, like, it doesn't matter. Okay,
I was wondering how closely you engage them. You know, I had Anthony Magnabosco on here recently. We were talking about street epistemology, and it seems like this is just begging for some street epistemology when you engage one-on-one with these guys as to, well, you know, that's a lead-in to, well, how is that not genocide, or how is this not incest, or how does this reconcile with, you know, your beliefs or your ideas of what's right and wrong? You know, without being like vicious. I mean, you're not antagonistic. So, you know,
my approach was, I wasn't trying to win an argument. I was just trying to plant a seed of doubt and ask questions to make them think.
Well,
so that was kind of my approach.
Yeah, and that's street epistemology, right? Yeah. Is asking questions, engaging, and getting the person's thought processes moving, and it just seems, wow, what a place to start, you know.
And it was interesting going through there because, like, when I walked in, as soon as I walked in, security was like, "Hi, Jim, how you doing?" Like, immediately. So we had an escort, because normally when you go through there, like if you and I went through and we start ripping it apart, and we had a crowd of people, because we drew a crowd of people that, you know, they would ask us to leave or can't talk about that. But because we had an escort, we were freely going through exhibit to exhibit and ripping it apart, and it was okay. So that was a different experience going through there, you know. And then my favorite part of the whole experience was at the very end. Bill Nye took some selfies for my kids for their birthday, and he turned to me and said, "I'm surprised they let you in this place."
Yep. I honestly, I am too, given that billboard.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you have more plans for this. This is not a done deal. That was your first round of protests, but now what's the future?
So round two, we decided to make this an annual event on the 1-year anniversary. Our theme, we've shifted from Genocide and Incest Park to Built on Hate, Lies, and With Your Tax Dollars.
Okay.
So that is our theme. When Tracy Moody did a really good Noah's Ark with a pirate ship sailing on a sea of money. And so that is our theme, because it's still the same thing. It's anti-science. They're hiring discrimination, and all they're doing this while the city's going bankrupt. The city and county are in major trouble. The mayor's store closed down that's been open for dozens of years.
Oh, really?
Businesses are closing down in the town. It's struggling, and it's done nothing for the county or city. Now, other areas have benefited from the Ark being there, but the way they set this up, the county and city gave away everything to get it there, and the other areas are benefited from it, not so much where it actually is.
Now that's interesting. How does that work? Can you give me a little bit more about that? I'm surprised by that.
Well, this should have been common sense, not just because it's a religious thing, but if you get off the exit, you go to the right, it's right there. If you want to go to the town, you'd have to take a left and go a mile or two down the road. It doesn't look like there's anything. So nobody visits. I don't care if you would put Disneyland there,
right,
or a water park. Like, people are just getting off. And now, if you look at the exits ahead of that, you have Florence, which has built up plenty of restaurants, nice hotels. People stop there. On the way to Lexington, people stop there. But where it actually is, there's nothing there.
Okay.
And if you had to go through the town to get to it, I would see it as being a boon to the town. But the town's in the opposite direction, and you can't even see it. So the day we parked there, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I don't care what it is. Anything there would not help the town that much for what they gave away. And it goes beyond this, too. Like, Kentucky is a coal state, which coal's going away. And instead of funneling money into renewable energies or growth, we're funneling money into the Ark Encounter. And and things that are anti-science instead of pro-science. We're the year of the Bible for the second year in a row. We have a resolution that says in the year of the Lord on all of our resolutions. The governor came out and said that we have a crime problem and harem problem, so he's putting prayer patrols out on the streets to solve this problem instead of using actual scientific methods and studies to solve these problems. So this is dangerous thinking all the way across the board that's actually affecting our legislators and our state government, which is affecting the people well beyond just the Ark.
Right.
This is much bigger than that.
I see. I see. No, this is, and I can see why you're so motivated to engage in local activism, because it's wow. I guess lucky or whatever, but we don't have those kind of problems here. I mean, I'm in Denver, and Colorado certainly got its share of fundamentalists and religious belief, but man, that's a whole nother level you got going on there.
Yeah, and Colorado is my shining example. You may be unaware of this. Colorado used to have the same abstinence-only sex education that Kentucky did. And they came out with they said sex education needs to be comprehensive, scientifically and medically accurate, and we're going to give free birth control to teens, including IUDs. Those are the implants. And so they gave away those for free. The teen pregnancy rate in Colorado and the STD rate and the abortion rate dropped by 30 to 40% almost immediately.
Like, it's such a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you know what the response was to that in Colorado? They tried to defund the program just last year. And so Colorado fought tooth and nail and was able to hold on to keep the program. But it was so successful, they almost lost it.
It's not, I don't want to get really down on belief, because I'm big on tolerance and freedom of belief. But I tell you, when you hear stuff like that, the first thing that just comes to the forefront for me is Christopher Hitchens, and how religion poisons everything. Because you have a statistically proven program that is making things better, but because of some arbitrary idea that we know best and our way is the best way, despite proof that it's not that way, they're still going to insist that it's their way or the highway. And that kind of thinking just drives me nuts.
I have a common statement I say to my legislators when I'm there, and it's, I will defend your right for your personal beliefs. I will stand by your side, but you do not have the right to impose that belief on the people. Yep. And that's the line that's often crossed, is they want to impose their personal beliefs on the people through legislation, which is harmful. If you look at Planned Parenthood or what's happening with them, this is harmful to women. The sex education is harmful to teens. Discriminating against LGBT, which creates a homeless problem and suicide problem. Like their views and beliefs, they're harmful. These are actually harming citizens. And that's why we must stand up and say no more.
Yeah, and I hope anybody watching or listening to this is kind of getting the point that this isn't about we think your beliefs are silly. This is about improving the life of everyone, believers and non-believers, right? We want you guys who are faith-based believers to have a better quality of life. We want ourselves to, non-believers to have a better quality of life. This isn't about ridicule or trying to hate on believers or something. This is about trying to help teens, help women, help everyone get along better. I really hope that, that can be, that everybody can see that.
We want our legislators, our school boards to make decisions based on facts and science, not belief. When I was at a school board, every school board member said, "Well, I believe," and they said a false statement.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not true. And finally I had to tell my local senator, "Sir, I don't care what you believe. I have the facts and data here. Can we just agree to go off the facts and let's throw beliefs out, because you're just wrong." And so that's the issue. Freedom of and from religion is important. We're not trying to say people can't believe what they want. We just have to get them to stop imposing it on the people through government.
Right.
And the separation church and state not only protects the atheists of the world, it protects religion.
Right.
People forget, who originally Madeline Murray O'Hare got prayer thrown out of school, but people forget. Do you know who the organization that got Bibles thrown out of public schools was?
No.
The Catholic Church, because it was the wrong Bible and it was the wrong teachings. And the Catholic Church said, no, we need a separation of church and state. And that's why we have all these Catholic private schools. They created their own schools to teach it the right way, according to them.
Interesting.
So, religion it used to be religion wanted the separation of church and state, but that is deteriorated over the years drastically. And especially with the latest ruling on the playground, where now government can fund religious playgrounds, it's a horrible decision.
An awful decision. Do you want to speak any more to that? Because this is like days old news from the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this school ground wanted to rubberize their thing for child safety, and they said they were discriminated against because they were a church, because the state constitution says you can't give church money. It's pretty clear separation of church and state. And they sued all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's decision was, well, they shouldn't be discriminated because they're a religion. This is for kids. It's a playground. It's a public area. But they use this public area to proselytize and to lure kids into the church. And when you give churches money, even with the voucher programs, like we have churches saying, like on public school vouchers, like, oh, it's just for education. But the pastor comes out and said, hey, if it wasn't for this voucher program, we couldn't have fixed up the church. We couldn't have got the bell working again. Like they abuse this money all over the place.
Wow.
So this creates, and they said it was an isolated position, that this wasn't to be used as precedent. We all know that's crap. It's going to be used for precedent over and over again.
Right.
It's going to be a major, major problem. So, the dissent argument was really good.
That was Sotomayor's argument.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important on voting and electing, because look at the Supreme Court justice we got, who we thought, my position was, okay, Scalia's gone. It can't get worse than Scalia. Who cares? And then we got this, a new person coming in, and I'm reading what he's writing, and I'm horrified.
Yeah, Gorsuch.
Yeah.
Plus, one of the other, I was listening on the radio yesterday. A guy who studies this stuff was talking about how it's a fairly conservative court already. I mean, when you talk about the liberal members, you're not talking about real left-wing guys. You're talking about centrists more so than conservatives. But one of them is looking at retiring. And so there's a possibility that there will be another, that Trump will have the opportunity to nominate someone else to this. And no, kind of a no-brainer as to, which way they'll be leaning.
Yeah, and that's scary. And we see that federal. We also see it here locally. You know, the governor just signed a thing, I believe it was yesterday, to the Bible is going to be taught as an elective in Kentucky public schools.
You got to be kidding me.
No, and this is legal now. And the problem is, if you're going to teach the Bible as what it is, like as history, like, hey, here's the story of Moses. We know this didn't happen. This was impossible. And here's what they believe. And here's what the Muslims believe. And here's what the Jewish people believe. Like, I would have no problem with that. But we're in Kentucky. They're going to teach this as proselytization.
That's right.
And you're going to burn in hell if you don't believe this. And it's going to muddy the waters between separation church and state. Like, people are coming out of the woodwork saying, Jim, when are you going to sue them for this? I'm like, I can't. You know, until they proselytize, which they will, but it's going to be harder to prove, and it's going to create a nightmare. Just say, hey, students can have Bibles, teachers not so much of teaching it to the kids. Like, that's the line. Now that line is blurred even more.
Well, you know, maybe another counter to this also might be introducing the concept of teaching the Quran as an elective.
Yeah, but that's probably not going to happen.
Well, I'm just saying, you know, yeah. If you can have one, why can't you have the other? You know, I mean, it's just as, you know, you know, if they get outraged about that, you might go, yeah, guess what? You know, now you know how we feel.
Or take it a step further and have the Satanic Temple come in with their tenets.
Exactly.
You know?
Teach the Necronomicon.
That's what they've been doing. Yeah, so we do have an interest. So, you know, we have the Ark protest Saturday, July 8th. Okay, that's from 10 to 2. But on the 16th, the following week, we actually have Matt Dillahunty from the Atheist Experience coming in to debate a Satanist. And the Satanist is taking on the position that religion is good.
Really?
So, yeah, and Matt said he's never debated a Satanist before. So this ought to be an amazing thing of the Satanist saying religion's good and, you know, the atheist saying not so much.
You know, I want to see that. That sounds interesting.
We're definitely going to record it. Matt's going to record it for his viewers. So
yeah, that needs to get posted. I absolutely want to see how that rolls. Interesting. All right. Now, any other things we should be talking about here in terms of recent or upcoming activities or you know, protests or anything you guys are getting involved in?
It seems like I'm at a protest every other day or around. I would like to put a call out to people, though. American Atheists is looking to put state directors in all 50 states. We're only in about half. So, and in addition to the states we're in, we're looking to put assistant directors in every major city. So we're looking for grassroots activists. These are volunteer positions, but if they are interested, I would love for them to reach out to me, and we'd love to start those conversations and hooking them up with some of the local activist groups to start changing things on the local level, which I believe over time will have a national effect. I
agree completely. That is how it starts. How do they contact you?
jhelton at atheist.org. jhelton at atheist.org. I'm on Facebook as well, Twitter, TSF Jim. But just reach out to me, send me an email. I'd love to start that conversation with you.
Excellent. And does your you know, position as a national field organizer or local American Atheists group have a website, or is it just americanatheist.com, or how
it's atheist.org. is the American Atheist website. I would encourage people to become a member of American Atheists. They also have their big convention coming up in August. You can actually see the eclipse. So they positioned it so you can see the eclipse. So come to the American Atheist Convention. It's going to be amazing. Go to Atheist. So we need people to support the local groups and the national groups. Because if you look at Ken Ham, he raised almost $100 million for this project.
Yep.
So we need to fund the organizations that are fighting for church and state. We need to fund our local organizations. So we don't have a 10% tithe like the church does every week and how they manipulate people out all this money. But what we do need people is, if they're capable, to either come out and support them financially. And if they're not, you know, get boots on the ground. That's just as important to be out there holding a protest sign or talking to your council person or your school board. That's what we need from people across the country.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Jim, thank you very much for your time and attention on this, and for speaking to these issues, and for all of the work that you do in protesting, because I think that work, even if localized, does have ripple effects and does go all the way out to, Seattle, Washington, and Baja, California, and is important. And it's important that we have people like you out there, who are willing to stand up and say, yeah, no, I don't agree with this. This is wrong. And I'm not going to just sit on my couch and watch it happen.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I will get you out here for one of the upcoming ARK protests so we can actually give you a tour.
That would be awesome. I would absolutely love that. We can do some live streaming from there.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. All right. So I'm just going to wrap up the podcast here. Folks, if you have any comments, questions, disagreements, agreements, up, down, sideways, leave them in the comments section on my YouTube channel or at sensiblyspeaking.com. Give me a rating, give me a like, share this video far and wide across the interwebs, because we definitely want to activate people out there. And again, thanks for coming around and watching, and we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.